Good morning, everyone. Again, the text that we're going to look at is James chapter 4, verses 13 through 17. As you're turning there, I'm going to be reading the text from my phone this morning, largely because I have misplaced that black Bible that I normally use here. Somewhere in this church is a black folder like this, a Bible, and a shoulder strap. I'm missing all of them now, and I have a feeling they're all together somewhere, but I can't find them. So this morning I'm going to have to read off my phone, and I apologize for that, but the text is the same. It's going to be the New American Standard Version. But it's the first Sunday of 2026, and whether we like it or not, the turning of the calendar does something in our minds. We do see it happening in everyone's minds. A new year tends to invite reflection. It tends to stir up the propensity to make plans. It awakens the desire to make resolutions. And it's almost as though there's this belief that if we plan carefully enough, if we organize and prioritize and discipline ourselves properly, etc., we'll finally have that productive year that we're looking for. And with all this in mind, I thought it might be helpful to begin the year looking at a very short and very practical passage in James. And we're going to read it together. This is James chapter 4, verses 13 through 17, and then we'll make some observations. In 13, it says, "Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engage in business and make profit. Yet you do not know what your life will be tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live, and also we will do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. Therefore, to one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin." James is one of the most practical books in the entire New Testament. I think we all would agree with that. There are no long theological arguments here. There are no extended doctrinal treatises. James talks about everyday Christian living here. It's stuff you can really sink your teeth into. It talks about our words and our tempers and our money and our faith. And in this passage, what it's talking about is the very plain and ordinary thing that we all do, which is to make plans. It's talking about making plans with our lives. In verse 13, James quotes this mindset in New Testament language, but it does reflect the mindset that many of us have today. Today or tomorrow, we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and to make profit. He's describing just that everyday thing that we all do. We make plans, what we're going to do with our life. That's what he's talking about there. And note here that James is not criticizing planning itself. In fact, Scripture consistently affirms wisdom, diligence, foresight, and preparation. What James is addressing here isn't planning, per se. It is the way that we plan. It is a way of ordering our lives as if God were distant or if he were irrelevant. It is a way of planning that falsely assumes that tomorrow is guaranteed, that outcomes are predictable, and that control belongs to us. James is addressing planning with no awareness of the God of the universe, of the God who knows all things, governs all things, and sustains every breath that we take. This is the problem that James is talking about here. He's not saying don't plan. He's saying he's talking about the planning in the way that just completely forgets that God is even there. And again, James doesn't say stop planning. He says in verse 15, instead you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. Now, James, as you read through here, it says, if the Lord wills, we'll do this. If the Lord wills, we'll do this or that. Another thing he's not saying here in addition to he's not criticizing planning, he's not advocating for religious catchphrases. He's not advocating for us to sprinkle pious jargon on everything that we say and we do. Have you ever been around people that are like, oh, the Lord this, oh, the Lord that? You know, it's kind of annoying. I don't know how else to say it than that. You know, I have noticed sometimes that people, especially if they hear that I'm a pastor, they'll start sprinkling, oh, the good Lord this, oh, the good Lord that, on everything that they say around me, as though I'm going to be impressed by the insertion of pious jargon into that stuff. It annoys me. Don't do it around me. Just if anyone's listening to this another way, it annoys me. Just don't. I don't do it as well. It doesn't impress me, and it's not what this Bible is talking about. It's not what the Bible's talking about here. It's talking about something different. James is actually challenging us to actually live with the awareness that God is present and active and sovereign and involved, and to live with the perspective that his ways are infinitely higher than our ways and his thoughts are infinitely higher than our thoughts. He's challenging us to live with that awareness in our hearts. If you want to say that once in a while, it's great, but it's just sprinkling it out there in words doesn't make it true. It's living with that awareness in your heart that makes it happen. James is calling us to plan and to live with this awareness constantly, having the effect of shaping how that we think and decide, and the way it will affect the way that we cling to expectations. And when we live this way, when we live in a way that God is real, you know, not just kind of theoretical, James says that something happens inside of us. That's what the text is talking about here. He's saying that this reshapes our hearts in powerful ways. And we're going to look for just a few minutes here on two ways, two spiritual effects that this has upon our hearts when we live as though God is sovereign, he's on the throne, he's in control of everything, and he's ordering the entire universe around us. When we live that way, when we really, when it's in the marrow of our bones and we believe that in our hearts, it has an effect upon us spiritually as we go about making plans, okay? The first way is this. Our arrogance is replaced with humility. All right, our arrogance is replaced with humility. These are very basic things that appear all over the scriptures. It's funny how no matter what you talk about, you're going to talk about arrogance being replaced with humility as you're leading into the Lord. And the same thing is true when you're making plans. There's a process as you're making plans that your arrogance will be replaced with humility. But James confronts us in verse 14 with a pretty jarring reminder. It says in verse 14, "Yet you do not know what your life will be tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away." Arrogance, at its core, is the mistaken belief that we are in control of our lives, that we are the authors of what happens next. And James says that this way of thinking is not only misguided, it's boastful. And that's why he says in verse 16, "But as it is, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil." All right? The world is filled with people, often very successful and very accomplished people, who live under the delusion that they're in control, that they're over what happens next. But the reality couldn't be more opposite. The reality is that the reason we draw breath from moment to moment is because God allows it to happen. Would you believe me if I told you that? The reason we breathe from moment to moment is because God allows it to happen. And that's what James was getting at in verse 14 when he says, "Yet you do not know what your life will be tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away." He's just putting things back in perspective. The only reason you even draw breath is because God allows it to happen. Our lives are fragile. Our timelines are uncertain. Our control is far more limited than we'd like to admit. In fact, we don't have control when we really stop and think about it, even when we think that we do. And when this truth sinks in, humility follows. Not despair, not paralysis. Actually, humility, a good thing, follows. And it changes. It has an effect upon the way that we plan. We still plan, but we plan in pencil, all right? We plan in a way that is adaptable. We plan in a way that we can erase it, we can change it, we can adjust it, or we can throw it all away if we need to, all right? We hold our plans loosely. We acknowledge that even our best laid plans may be altered or overturned in a moment. And when they are, we're not completely thrown off. If we make a great plan and then God changes it completely, we're okay with it. I was thinking about this as I was preparing, because when I was in the Army, one of the things I used to hate the most about the Army was the way that they would just change the plans all the time. I hated that. And there was something in particular that really used to gall me. And I don't know why this galled me, so I guess I kind of do, but we would be training and we would be setting up a defense, and I would spend literally hours digging a foxhole. And you had these entrenching tools. Have you ever seen those? They fold up into this little thing, they unfold. They're not a very big shovel. And a lot of times we'd have to dig these foxholes with these entrenching tools. And they were huge. They were several feet down. You'd have to get in there, low enough to be able to get down. You'd have to dig it enough where you can put some covering over the top of it. And I'd work on this for hours and hours and hours. And then some officer would come over and he would inspect the defenses and he would say, that foxhole's in the wrong spot. Fill it in and move it 6 feet to the left. And all that work would have to be filled back in and I'd have to start all over again. I hated that. I mean, it just galled me, right? And to be honest with you now, I think it probably wasn't just about the work. I think at the time it felt like it, but I think it was about control too. I think when I really peel back the layers of why that galled me so much, it's that I didn't trust in the wisdom of my superiors, and I resented having my plans disrupted. I liked this foxhole. I would usually put a lot of time into it and make sure the edges were all trimmed up nice and stuff like that, because I planned on being there for a while. And then they just say, fill it in and dig another one, and it just used to really gall me because I had all of my plans lined up into this. Living with a clear awareness of who God is and who we are in comparison produces a difference in response in us as well. What I'm trying to say here is that when God changes our plans, we can adapt joyfully if we trust in his wisdom. The reason that I didn't adapt joyfully is because I did not trust in the people changing my plans, and I was kind of selfishly holding on to them. But if we live with a clear awareness of who God is and who we are in comparison, then we can really adapt to his changes of plans joyfully. And we see something like this happening in multiple places in the scriptures, but I think one of the best places to go, we're not going to turn there this morning, but just jot this down. Jot down Acts chapter 15, verses 36 through 16:13. There we see Paul getting together with Barnabas and saying, hey, let's make a plan here. Let's go on a second missionary journey. And it's really what they're doing. They lay the plans, they figure out the people they're going to take, and we watch as this missionary journey begins, as their plans unravel completely. And the missionary journey goes forward, but it goes forward in a completely different way than they had anticipated. From the very start, they said, we're going to, Paul and Barnabas started arguing over taking Mark. And they got upset by that. And it became contentious for them because one wanted to take him and one didn't, and they ended up parting company. And so now the team has changed, and there's actually one team going one way and one team going the other way. And then as they're making their way, it says that the Spirit of the Lord forbid them not, when it was talking about the direction that they were planning on going. And then Paul gets this vision that calls him into Macedonia, and he realizes that he's supposed to be in Macedonia. And when he gets there, he encounters all kinds of problems and adversity when he's there. And my point here is that doors closed, routes changed, directions shifted, and eventually Paul was directed a completely different way. But Paul was flexible the entire time, and that flexibility wasn't weakness. It was humility rooted in trust. The idea here is that's the way it's supposed to work. We make our plans, but we plan in pencil, and we recognize that God can change them in a moment, and when he does, we can just roll with it. Our ability to do that is rooted in humility, and the humility of knowing that we are but vapor, and he is the God of the universe. I'm not a very flexible guy. I struggle with it. I like my stuff to be the way that it's supposed to be. This is a problem for me. And I have to at least acknowledge that part of the reason that I'm not flexible at times is because I'm hanging on and clinging on to things in this world too much. In order for me to be flexible the way that I need to be, I need to recognize that He is God and I am not, and my life is but a vapor and I have no control. And the stuff I'm clinging to is me just trying to have control of something that I can never have control over. You have to let it go. You have to let it go. You have to plan in pencil. But there is another thing that happens in our hearts, and that is that our anxiety is replaced with peace. Our anxiety is replaced with peace. If arrogance is the belief that we are in control, I should say the false sense that we are in control, then worry is the desperate desire to be in control combined with the painful awareness that we're not. All right, and I know it's a mouthful, but I'll say it again. If arrogance is the belief that we're in control, then worry is the desire to be controlled, combined with the painful awareness that we're not. So we're anxious about it. We know we're not in control and we want to be controlled, right? Arrogance assumes control. Worry tries to get control. Both are different symptoms of the same problem, and that is forgetting God, just living our lives and forgetting that God is even there. It's such a huge problem. I mean, God is the creator and sustainer of everything, and this world lives. So much of it lives like He's not even there. And when Israel in the Old Testament got into their biggest problems, it was when they just forgot God. They just forgot all about Him, all right? But when God fades into the background, our anxiety can rush to the foreground. And we just need to keep that in mind. But when we remember that God is on His throne and that God is infinitely good and powerful and wise, then it is natural for us to trade our worry for peace, even when we don't have all the answers. It is still possible for us to have peace, even in those moments. And to give you an example, I'm surprised I didn't think of this example last week, but I'll give it this week. Danny's going to be, Holly and I were talking about Danny's graduation plans, graduating from high school. And I was struck with the awareness, wow, he's almost done with high school. He's almost done. And the reason that this struck me is because the plan to send him to high school was one that had some anxiety in it, for me anyway, because we both felt pretty strongly. I would venture that we felt led, Holly and I, that it would be good for Danny to go to the school that we sent him to, that Danny's needs were such that he would thrive, he would have his best experience at St. Joe's. And it's not cheap, and it was kind of way out of the way. And we had been thinking about it a lot and reflecting on it a lot, and we decided to go for it. But there were a lot of lingering questions there. How are we going to pay for it? How are we going to get him there? How are all the logistics going to come together? Again, all the kids are kind of growing up and leaving the nest now. But back then, we didn't have lots of vehicles. We didn't have lots of options. Things were going to be a little harder. We didn't have all the answers. We moved forward in obedience. We had some ideas, but we didn't have it all figured out. And what we found out after we moved forward in obedience is that God already had the solution already in place. And it came from somewhere we didn't even know was going to happen. You know what it was? Holly was offered a teaching position at St. Benedict's School. She didn't even look for that job. It found her. All right? And that school was right down the road from where Danny was going to school. And so not only came the tuition help that we needed, but also the transportation. She loaded him up every day, took him to school. I mean, their schedules were the same. All that overlapped. It was beautiful. She could get right over to him if he needed to come home. Everything worked out perfectly. And we went into that not knowing how we were going to take care of it. All right? And now we're almost done with it. He's going to graduate, and everything came together beautifully. And I did have some anxiety about it, but I had come far enough along to where I was able to move into those things not knowing all the details. But God knew all the details from the very beginning. He had a plan in place. It was fine. And we do need to live that way in general. That is the nature of trust. If we are prone to worry, we need to realize that worry tends to be about control. It tends to be about trying to control things that we cannot control. And we need to understand that about ourselves. And as I was reflecting upon this passage, I was listening to some other people and reading some other people. And it was Tim Keller, who he's since passed away, but he was the pastor of Redeemer Presbyterian Church. And he made this observation on this text, and I had never thought of it before. It was fascinating to me. He made the argument that we know we're in sin. We know we're forgetting God, and we're kind of our awareness of Him and is kind of not what it should be. We know we have a problem when we try to take God's incommunicable attributes. And what I mean by incommunicable attributes, I mean those things about Him that we could never be, like His omniscience and His omnipotence, the fact that He's all-knowing and He's all-powerful, those things that we can never be, when we try to take those things to ourselves, all right, rather than the communicable attributes like patience and love and kindness. Have you guys ever heard that terminology before? God has communicable attributes and incommunicable attributes. I know it sounds like systematic theology 101. I'm not trying to bore you right now. But the idea is that there are some things about God that we should be striving for. We should be loving like Him. We should be patient like Him. We should be kind like Him and sacrificing like Him. These are things that we're supposed to be striving towards. All right? But there are other aspects of Him that we could never be. We could never be all-knowing. We could never be all-loving. We could never be all-powerful. These are things that only God can be, all right? And when we're following God, we're striving towards those communicable attributes. But when we're in sin, we're not worried about those things. We're trying to take the things upon ourselves that we could never do, like being all-powerful and being all-knowing. And when we try to do that, that's us trying to take control of things that we can't control. And trying to know things that we can't know. And when we do that, we worry and we get arrogant and all of those things that come with the world. Do you follow me? It's fascinating. I'd never seen that before, but it's true. When we're worrisome and when we're arrogant, it's because we're trying to be like God. We're trying to take His incommunicable attributes upon ourselves. And worry is an attempt to be like God, but peace comes when we let God be God. All right. Now, James concludes in verse 17 with this. And I'm going to read it. Again, I wish I had that Bible in front of me. Help me find this thing, okay? Speaking of needing control here. Therefore, what's that? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I buried it already. Therefore, to one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin, all right? And so this whole thing is about remembering that we need to live with an awareness that God is on the throne, all right? We need to make our plans, and we need to plan in pencil. And we need to be aware that when we are anxious or when we are proud, we're forgetting God, okay? But James takes us a step further. And he says, now you've been warned, okay? Now you've been warned. You've been told this. You've read it. All right? So now that you know it, you have more responsibility to do it. Once you know that God is sovereign, once you know that your life is fragile, once you know that trusting Him brings humility and peace, to ignore that truth is no longer ignorance, it's disobedience. And so just be careful as you're making your plans in 2026. You're going to plan. We all do it. It's normal. It's what we're supposed to be doing. It would be irresponsible to not do that. The question is not whether you're going to plan. The question is how you're going to plan. Are you going to plan in pencil, in a flexible way that has an awareness that God is real and alive and powerful and on the throne? It could change everything in a moment. Or are you going to try to take control of everything like this world does? Or are you going to try to take control of things that you could never control? Right? The peace and the humility that we need to follow the Lord and the things that we need to take on, the character of Christ, come when we recognize that God is on the throne and He is in control of everything, even when we don't feel like He's in control. You know what? When I read the news, my tendency is to feel like he is not in control sometimes. And I have to stop and go, nope. All this stuff is happening, but you're in control. And there are probably things happening in your life right now, whether they be financial, whether they be physical, whether they be with your job. There's all kinds of things that can happen with your family that can make you feel like life is spiraling out of control. All right? In those moments, stop, pause, remember that God is in control, and that is what brings you back to center. That's what gets rid of the anxiety and the worry. Will you pray with me?